Shalom. If you can see me and hear me, thank you for being in our space. If not, and you're looking at this long after we've gone live, thank you for clicking on our video and, just paying attention to the information being shared. So this evening, it is a Sovereign Sunday as usual. That's my main staple. I always say that, but welcome to our Sovereign Sunday. And so today we're going to actually quickly explore the idea of tainted baby foods, right? Toxic baby foods. And, you know, for a long time, a really long time, I think some companies have monopolized um, the market and that industry when it comes to babies. Greetings, shalom, Deidre Sully, peace and welcome. Thank you for being here. But for a long time, specific food companies have actually monopolized the market. And, you know, it makes me think about, it makes me think about, you know, how much that they've made money on mothers and families who have become dependent on them for providing foods for the young ones, for their young ones. And our last Sovereign Sunday Live, we had an extraordinary mother from Jazira's fashion house sharing a lot of her tips and tricks around, how she how she does it, how does she prepare and make sure that her son has access to healthy food that is free of toxins and free of toxicity. And I think the major clue there was she makes her own. She makes her own. But today we're not really going to jump into how can we make our own, but more so what you can find on the shelves, right? So, when I speak of toxins, I am including metals, but I want you to understand that we need iron and other metals in our diet, right? So when I speak of, if you hear me call one or two elements or metals that may be toxic, understand that I'm speaking about the levels and the type of metal that's present in the food. And I'm not speaking specifically about metals that are necessary for our health, right? Human health. And I think it's important to know that even though we're looking at this topic today, and you're probably saying, well, why? This is Mental Health Month. Toxins and heavy metals that get into food actually affects the functioning of the brain. So very, very crucial topic to consider within this month. And if we're going to talk about, just supporting mothers through the entire month of May, then part of supporting them is being able to say or place certain ideas and understandings about food and how food affects their youth. It's important to uncover that and put that on the table so we can have dialogue, or just for you to know so that it actually adjusts your shopping habits, right? And spending habits when it comes to purchasing foods for youth, for babies specifically. Greetings, Naya. Peace. Peace. How are you? Thank you for greeting everyone. I appreciate that. Thank you for coming into the space. So early on, one of the things I found, because this is something that I was actually looking into back in April, and I think I was looking at an article, and there was something else that triggered my desire to like jump into it, right? And one of those things was, just the audacity of the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration of the United States. And, the way that they've allowed for baby food toxins to continue to, just permeate and saturate the industry is crazy. I think I've been hearing about that complaint and this issue for so many years. And I have no youth of my own, but I I'm around many mothers, and many mothers who are in families, right? Not single mothers, but mothers who are in families. Those conversations have been huge family that conversations that has led to people shifting the way they eat and the way they food prep and so on, because they come to the realization that the standards I have for myself, the companies that actually make these foods don't have those standards too. What's important for them is an economic standard, right? The amount of money that they actually make from it. So really important to think about. Now, the Food and Drug Administration, though, has created a plan. So they have an action plan in place, and that report is public, right? So feel free to look for it, because in there they kind of break down what specific things that they are going to do in order to solve that issue. Or get to the bottom of it. But yeah, as of now, there are lots of different foods that particularly have high levels of toxins such as arsenic. Greetings, brother Emmanuel and brother Antonio Smith. Shalom. Yes, Yom Rishon Tov to you as well. Kol Tov. All right. Be well to all of you. So yeah, there are levels of arsenic and lead. I just want to get to the mentioning of the different toxins so that I don't forget. But arsenic, lead, cadmium, which takes really long to actually degrade, mercury, right, which everyone's staying away from mercury. You hear about mercury filings all the time. You hear about mercury being in certain seafoods, and so it's really important to think about the levels of mercury and how they get there. How do they get there? We'll talk a little bit about that. But again, arsenic, lead, cadmium, and mercury are present in commercial baby foods at levels that are much higher than what is considered safe, right? So think about that. Greetings and shalom, Akuya Bisa, and I hope I'm saying it right. And shalom, Ima Sequoia. Thank you for joining. Thank you for being in the space and being on live. And if please share as freely as you can. If you know anyone, share the information. If you know of any additional toxins, please share. But apart from these toxins, I want us to consider how much preservatives have to go into something to keep it from spoiling on the shelf, right? We can put something in a can and we can utilize it after several years. We could put something in a vacuum seal, right? Vacuum sealed items can actually store for very long. I have a vacuum seal and I use it. It really does. It removes a lot of the air, and with air comes bacteria. So that kind of helps to prevent the degrading and the breaking down of the food. However, foods that have a long shelf life that are in bottles, such as baby foods, and I don't want to call certain names, but if you think of applesauce and creamed carrots and creamed peas and all of these things are really easy to make, right? Really easy to make. So it makes you think about the convenience, right? The convenience that some of what we seek, right, within families or mothers or whomever continues to purchase foods. And I'm not saying this to make anyone feel guilty about it. I'm saying it so that it can bring awareness, so that when it comes to selecting foods, we are more cautious and intentional, right? That's the idea, being cautious and being intentional about what we purchase. So Deidre Sully says, MPH says, yet they are allowed to put it on shelves for consumption. Again, our standards will never be equivalent to the standards of the FDA. They're different. And they're different because, yes, they have to monitor and scrutinize, but remember, they are also quality control, so to speak, for companies that are the bread and butter of the economy, right? So, yeah, there's so much more to say about that. Deidre Sully says that is child abuse. It is child abuse, and if we have parents who are aware that there are toxins laced in certain foods, then it means that child abuse is not, we can't just, point fingers at the quality control agents or the companies. Now we have to point fingers at parents, right? And not so much to say, okay, you're such a horrible parent, and maybe that's the truth, yeah, I'm gonna just say it, because I'm gonna open my mouth. Yeah, maybe that's what it is. Maybe you just don't care, right? Because if you pick up a bottle and you read a lot of these bottles and labels, they tell you there's high fructose corn syrup. It indicates that there's levels of added sugars in there, but more importantly, preservative. And what irks me is when you pick up something that just says preservative, but you don't see what the preservative is. Sometimes you'll see BHT as a preservative. Sometimes you'll see sulfur dioxide as a preservative. And for those of you who don't know, a lot of the dried fruit that's on shelves that we feed to our youth. So, this is not even just bottled baby foods or packaged baby foods, but dried fruits. You'll see maybe they have sugars on them, maybe they don't. But if you'll notice that the fruit has a very bright color, the preservative sulfur dioxide, what it does is it helps to preserve color. So if let's say you've been daydreaming about dried papayas and your youth love it, and you've had babies before who enjoy it, instead of using a pacifier, you want to utilize a piece of dried fruit, just a little piece of dried fruit to help them with their teething or whatever. And we're talking about teething babies right now. But selecting fruit is actually a better alternative than a pacifier. However, select your fruit properly. Whenever dried fruits specifically, have a very bright color, it is supposed to excite that primal part of you to get you to buy it. But just remember, sulfur dioxide is the preservative that actually allows for that bright color. So as you're perusing those aisles, make sure to look out for the brightly colored ones. Stay away from them because they have preservatives that keeps their color, helps to keep the color. If you have a dehydrator, you can do your own. And I can tell you, because I've done dried fruit a lot, the color diminishes, right? And that's just part of it, because color and pigmentation in food is a natural thing. It is not synthetic. So these are cells. They're going to be affected by heat, whether it's dried in the sun or it's dried in a dehydrator. We have to understand that, right? If we put a banana out, it's going to oxidize. So playing with the color is actually, it's appealing, but the problem with appealing is it's not realistic. It's not realistic. It is not a reflection of the natural function or the way the plant naturally is. It's not. Brother Antonio, yeah, Ima Sequoia says it's cheaper to make homemade baby food. It actually is. It actually is. I'm going to highlight that just a bit, because you end up, when foods are in season, you can literally, strawberries are in season and you notice your youth love them. You can take strawberries and make all sorts of things. They can be freezed. I know a lot of people talk against freezing foods and preserving foods, but that's a natural way of preserving food. And especially when you have something in abundance that you want to hold. And people who are homesteaders, people who are into canning and preserving foods, that's what they do. They strategically utilize foods when they're in abundance, and they prepare large bulk of it, and they end up spending less money, right? So that's an excellent point. Thank you. Brother Antonio says there's actually an oil-based paint. Oops, sorry. I misread that. Paint that uses cadmium as a component, very toxic when consumed. An oil-based paint. Yes, yes. And so that's that. When it comes to toxins in proximity to youth and babies and even us, it's important to think about making sure we purchase things that are non-toxic. But again, even when it says non-toxic, you have to ask, how is it non-toxic? What have you done? How is this treated? What is in it? Right? What's in it? Because most times when something is treated and they put this big label non-toxic, they're doing something to it. How are you augmenting this thing chemically so that way it could no longer include this previous toxin, but are you adding titanium dioxide to it as well? Because which can be found in gum, right? It's responsible for making gum very white, but also connected to it's also connected to cancer and cancers because it's carcinogenic, right? So there are all these other things. Like we could take this conversation in many other ways, but back to the baby food. Deidre Study says, yes, I'm familiar with FDA shenanigans. Yeah, share some of the shenanigans that you're aware of in the chat, please. You know, we can blow them up today. Just because. For those of you who are coming in, normally we're here at 6, but we're here right now, so I do apologize for the late easing on in. Kuya says, my apologies, I missed the topic. What products are we speaking of? We're speaking about baby food. We're just talking about the toxins that are present in baby food. But the conversation can go in so many different directions. Okay, Deidre Sully gave the information. Thank you. Ima Sequoia says, it's difficult for parents who live in a culture where they need things to be convenient in order to function within a certain society. It's a lifestyle change. It definitely is a lifestyle change, and it's and then Sequoia further says it's a cultural change. It definitely is a cultural change, right? Because your culture can dictate whether you eat from outside or not, right? And can you imagine how many different things that you have to think about, right? And filter your brain, at least I do, if I have to purchase food from someone else or food that has been prepared elsewhere. And I know when we think about these big companies, we think that they have lots of quality control standards in place, many of them. But I think more of the conversation, we're going to shift the conversation now to where the source, right? What is the source of the arsenic, the lead, the cadmium, and mercury? And we know those things can cause brain malfunction, cognitive decline, fogginess. It can cause issues with memories, development, right? Children develop learning disabilities from being exposed to these types of things. And Brother Antonio mentioned the paint. Just chips of paint or being in proximity to certain lead-based paints can actually affect brain function, right, in youth. And those are the formative years for the brain and the body and the biology of little humans. Right? So imagine those toxins affecting that function. It becomes a problem, especially at such a young age because they're so vulnerable, right? So one of the things that I wanted to point out too was that baby food companies, they set their own standards for toxic metals. I'm just going to say that. They set did you hear me? They set their own standards for toxic metals. So we have a policing agent, so to speak, or a quality control group, right? But at the same time, the same companies, they have their own standards. So this is a little bit confusing, because if there are standards already developed, because there's a standard body across the board that should be monitoring and quality control of these foods specifically for babies, then how is it you have your own standard? And if you're creating your own standard, how can we trust that the standard that you're creating supersedes what is already at a national level, right? How do I know that the standards that you have created reflect standards of mothers who you've interviewed and gotten? They are, are those standards only a reflection of, they're only a reflection of how much financial profit that the company can make. So, and that's not my lane of conversation and dialogue, but I really, sometimes it's important to highlight how those things actually affect or drive the way those companies produce certain foods and why they produce certain foods in that way. So again, the FDA knows that baby foods have high levels of toxic metals, but they've been doing nothing about it. And this is why I'm speaking about it now, because again, many years ago, this became apparent to me. I never knew it. I never knew it because I was never growing up in the Caribbean. Baby food in bottles has never been a thing. I came here and saw people heard people talking about baby food. I'm not saying, people didn't use baby food where I was born and reared, but you pretty much gave the baby the same food you ate. You would mash it. Like I have a story. I can picture my aunt sitting with my cousin on her lap, and she has her plate of food, and she is literally, there's pumpkin there's maybe some peas, some beans, some greens, and she'll sit there and mash the pumpkin and feed her exactly what she's eating off of her plate. And sometimes that can be an issue too, because let's talk about salt levels and all of that, but at the same time, that's how babies consumed naturally, right? So they ate what we ate, not pop open a bottle and applesauce all day. It was never that. So those same companies don't share their data, right? So I felt that was important to actually consider, that even though they have their own regulations in place, they have their own regulations, but they're withholding that data. So it makes it very difficult for anyone else to come in and actually function as quality control, right? And actually lift their levels up to the standard, because those standards are being withheld. But the question now becomes, how have they been allowed to do that for so long? Why? Who's paying off who? Like whose pocket is being lined so that those records and that data remains hidden, right? So that it doesn't implicate the companies. Very important to think about. But I wanted to, as I'm going to share a story. And I was actually looking for the picture from one of my older Facebook profiles. A while back, like a few years ago, I actually encountered, and I had an encounter like that myself, where I realized that there were juice boxes, and I'm trying to remember the name of the company. I'm trying to remember the name of the company. I should look for it. There were juice boxes that were I don't know if it was the preservative that didn't function. I don't know if there were punctures or holes in it that allowed bacteria in, but one woman actually shared that she gave her child a juice box, and something similar to this happened to me many years ago. But and from since then I was like, okay, anything in a box carton that I cannot see will not touch these lips at all, right? At all. Brother Mari says, M. Anuel, pardon, says Capri Sun had mold in it all the time. And I don't know which one of the bag juice, it was a packaged juice. I had the same thing happen to me. But yeah, I can't remember what it was, but you're saying Capri Sun, and I've heard people complain about that one. But there was an apple juice that a woman gave to her son, And she said she watched him and he was drinking it, but it was just he was fighting with the bottle, and she said the box, and she couldn't figure out why he was sucking on the box so hard. And she took it from him to figure out, what was wrong, if it was done already. It wasn't, it was filled, but she couldn't understand. Every time he kept pulling up, he couldn't actually drink the juice. It was not flowing through the straw. So she decided to take the straw out and tried to squeeze whatever was in it. It couldn't come out. She decided to cut open the box, and when she cut open the box, there was just clumps of mold sitting in that clumps of mold sitting in that box. So this is what we expose our youth to, and mold can get into the brain, and it can have effects on the brain. It's just drinking mold and ingesting mold, that's something different. And the thing is, I can see why sometimes people may say, okay, if I have fresh juices and they're not, yes, yuck, super yuck, absolutely mold, yes. And there were pictures, so you can see dark browns, but there were green slimy things there too. So who knows what else was there? Maybe some kind of chemical reagent, mutant like chemicals, I don't know, mutating chemicals, I don't know. I don't know. But I don't know if she sued the company. I don't know what was her follow through, but I do know that, exposing our youth to boxes of anything, or cans, or packages of anything like the Capri Sun that you mentioned, that can be detrimental, because you don't know what's in it. You don't know what's being, housed and harbored and is growing in there, but also you don't know what chemical preservatives are being added to it. Greetings, shalom, achot kashia. Thank you for joining us. So that's something to think about. So here are some of the major reasons why toxins end up in foods is due to contaminated soil, contaminated water, and added minerals. And if you'll notice sometimes you pick up certain milk. And I say milk, it's off the top of my head. I always hear about fortified cereal as well too, can be fortified. So some of those minerals that are added can actually be detrimental to you. So very important to think about the types of foods, dried foods as well, that we consume or select, because they're being fortified. I say, if you're going to buy a cereal, buy something that's not fortified, that's just plain Jane, and fortify it yourself. How do you fortify it yourself? Maybe you can buy fresh fruits and vegetables, and make powders of your own, make juices and add to that. Make smoothie bowls instead of just cereal and milk. Those things are definitely healthier alternatives and more wholesome. I enjoy using powders. Sometimes I like things like spirulina. I like things like oh my gosh, hemp seeds and so on. So those even flax, those things can add and supplement and add minerals to whatever it is that you're making. Just for a side note, right? So contaminated soil. I've seen people grow foods in certain areas, specifically in areas in New York City, right, close to where I have been, and I would see them go through a process. All right, the process would be they want to plant, but they'll clear off the soil and they'll add a plastic barrier, and then they'll buy soil and put inside of that barrier. So it's almost like they're creating a whole soil bed from scratch, but they're not utilizing the soil that's there. And that's because the soil can be toxic and it's contaminated. So my question is this: where are those companies sourcing, right? Because so now it's not just the companies adding this or adding this preservative or that mineral so that they can fortify the food. It means that their raw material is coming from farms where the FDA probably is not present. Because if they are, and there's a standard for food and agriculture and what's harvested, how is it that you're harvesting and utilizing raw material that's tainted and contaminated? So the soil is, for many of the foods, the soil has been contaminated. So that raises issues with the, the farms and where they're farming, what they're farming habits are like. I mean, it may not just be the soil because of like a side effect of maybe, drainage or so. It actually may very well be the fertilizers that they're utilizing in the soil. So the conversation has to extend far beyond just what is the company that's processing the food, but also who's planting, right? Where's the raw material coming from? What is the soil like? What fertilizer is being utilized? And why are they utilizing fertilizers that would place contaminants, toxins, and heavy metals in the soil that would obviously be taken up by the roots of the plants, and those plants are then used, the fruits are then used to make baby food. So yeah, FYI. And again, the FDA knows about this. They know about the levels of toxic metals, but have not done anything to affect change. So, today I just wanted to, just share that there are several different toxins to pay attention to. These aren't things that you could test for, but the way that you can, kind of steer away from exposing your youth to that is to actually, as Ima Sequoia said, make your own. All right. And it's not just, like, we can't just become this collective that scrutinizes just what babies consume, right? In terms of food, we have to think about consumption beyond food, right? So I started off with the toxic food, baby food, but the food goes beyond what they eat or what they put in their mouths, right? Consumption also connects to media consumption, right? Media exposure, conversations, exposure to certain conversation, certain tones and levels of verbal communication that are introduced into a child's environment can lead to dysfunction in many, many ways. It affects the psyche, it affects the emotional development in many ways. So yes, we can look at and talk about toxic baby food, but it's not just the physical food that they're consuming, but also how we nurture the environment. And I'm bringing that point up because our last guest from last strong, or last Sovereign Sundays, Jazira, was able to point those things out strategically. So very important to think about. If you have anyone that you know of, please share with them. Let them know that they should actually go to the FDA website and look at that action plan and scrutinize it. Look for holes in it. I mean, it is a comprehensive piece, but it's important to know what steps they're taking to change or to augment that, to make sure that they lower the amount of toxins that are present in baby foods. But also hold yourself accountable, use that as knowledge as an opportunity for you to say, okay, maybe I can help a mother out, and I can share these are the best ways to create or recreate wholesome baby meals or wholesome baby food from scratch. All right. So that's it. That's all I wanted to share today. Thank you very much for tuning in and being a part of our dialogue and conversation. Please like, share, and subscribe. And I will see you all for our next link up on Tuesday for our midday motivation. All right. Peace, everyone. Peace and thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Toda. Okay. Ima Sequoia says, I use quinoa meal with flax seeds for naturally fortifying meals. Yes. Yes. Quinoa meal. Oh, quinoa meal. So that grounded. Yeah. That sounds very fortifying with flax seeds. And the last year, I know I said I was going, right? And then Ima Sequoia dropped that piece of that gem in there. Yes, that the Sovereign Sundays with Jazira was pretty good, and it's still up. And you can tap into a lot of her. She has excellent alternatives that she shared a lot actually. So you can tap in there, and you can add some of these ideas in the comment section too. Anyone who's coming in to listen to it will be happy to have that. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Peace, everyone.